Right, let's just dive straight into it. There's this sudden, completely visceral clash happening right now over returning to the office. We are really seeing the comfort of home colliding head-on with the echoing halls of our local business districts. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to completely take apart the data to figure out exactly what is happening to the modern workplace.
This is the exact question haunting CEOs across the globe right now, especially when they look at places like London's Bank Station. Historically, that's one of the busiest commuter hubs in the whole world, but rush hour Friday commuters there have dropped to roughly half of pre-pandemic levels. The physical footprint of work has undeniably changed for sure, but the corporate pushback is very, very real. So, to find the answer, we're going to crack open the corporate ledger. We'll look at the return to office tension, the hybrid bottom line, East versus West adoption, laws and labor power, and finally, what the workplace of 2030 is actually going to look like.
Okay, let's start with Section 1, the return to office tension.
We really need to look closely at the very real anxieties keeping business leaders awake at night. Take this East London record label CEO, for instance. He said, "I can't help but have this nagging feeling that sort of continual remote working has affected our bottom line." And for leaders like him, there is a deep, genuine fear that remote work is fundamentally breaking how we connect. It isn't just about tracking hours. It's this heavy anxiety that endless video calls are destroying organic mentorship and isolating younger staff from that essential workplace camaraderie. And this frustration actually scales all the way up to the macro economy. This argument is forcefully echoed by retail executives like Lord Stuart Rose, the former head of Marks & Spencer. They argue that keeping white-collar workers at home is just fundamentally bad for a country's overall economic growth. Their logic goes like this. If essential workers like train drivers and retail staff absolutely must commute, well, office workers should too, just to support the broader ecosystem of our city centers.
Which brings us to Section 2, the hybrid bottom line.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the actual financial data proving why so many massive corporations are completely ignoring the exact anxieties we just talked about. Despite all that high-profile pushback from some executives, a staggering 80% of Fortune 500 companies are sticking to a hybrid schedule. Why? Well, quite simply, it is incredibly profitable. When you strip away all the emotion and just look at the cold, hard ledger, hybrid work makes a ton of financial sense for large-scale operations.
Check out this metric because it should fundamentally change how we view compensation. Recruiters are reporting that employees value hybrid work so much they will effectively accept 8% less pay just to keep it. Think about what that actually means. If a CEO suddenly mandates a full return to the office, they essentially need to offer an 8% salary bump right out of the gate just to stop their staff from walking out the door.
And the brilliance of the hybrid model goes way beyond just base salary. According to some recent research published in the journal Nature from Stanford economist Nick Bloom, this flexibility drastically reduces staff turnover. He notes that quit rates fall by about a third. A third. That literally saves companies massive, massive costs associated with re-interviewing, onboarding, and rehiring talent.
So when a CEO sits down to evaluate the bottom line, it's like a giant puzzle. They are directly weighing these huge savings in talent retention against the sunk costs of their long-term, say 10 to 15-year commercial office leases. They're constantly balancing the loss of that physical, in-person culture against the hard financial efficiency of flexible work and those long-term remote infrastructure investments.
And to put a human face on that ledger, Bloom highlighted a disabled executive whose grueling 3-hour daily commute, which required immense physical effort and assistance, was reduced to just 20 minutes working from home. I mean, wow, that brilliantly proves how hybrid work vastly expands the inclusive hiring pool. It allows highly productive people to stay in the workforce who might otherwise be completely forced out by the sheer physical demands of commuting.
Moving right along to Section 3, East versus West adoption. We absolutely have to acknowledge that this realization hasn't been uniform everywhere, which reveals a truly fascinating cultural split. If we look at the data, while tech and finance sectors in Northern Europe, the US, Canada, and Australia are fiercely defending their 2 to 3 hybrid days, it's a completely different story in Asia. You look at cities like Tokyo, and they have seen an almost complete return to pre-2019 full-time office norms. The global map of work is just deeply fractured right now.
All right, Section 4, laws and labor power.
So how is this demand for flexibility transitioning from just a simple corporate perk into protected legal territory? Well, European countries are definitely not waiting around for corporate goodwill. They are actively writing legislation to cement remote work right into their labor laws. Spain has actually guaranteed the right to flexible arrangements. Ireland made it a legal right to just request remote work. And the UK is pushing forward an employment rights bill that explicitly covers work from home rights. Though it's definitely worth noting, businesses are lobbying really hard behind the scenes to influence how these rules actually get implemented.
Now, we also must impartially note that this whole thing has become a deeply political issue. Demographically speaking, university-educated office workers largely support work from home, while frontline service workers physically just cannot participate in it. So, figures like Elon Musk and Donald Trump appeal directly to those working-class frontline voter bases by openly criticizing the work-from-home privileges of university-educated professionals. It is fascinating how this labor divide translates directly into modern political messaging. Without taking sides, that's just the reality of the demographics we're looking at.
Which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, the workplace of 2030. Let's see how all of this data builds toward the inevitable future of our daily work lives. Researchers note that remote work has followed what they playfully call a Nike swoosh pattern. Picture that shape. There was this massive spike during the pandemic, a really sharp drop in 2022, and currently, we're coasting on a flat plateau. But look at the tail end of that swoosh. There is a definitive, undeniable upward curve projected toward the year 2030. And honestly, this upward trajectory is practically mathematically locked in. Why? First off, those restrictive 10 to 15-year commercial real estate leases will finally start expiring, which allows companies to take that capital and reallocate it into permanent remote setups. Second, younger, natively pro-remote CEOs are aging into power. And third, we are seeing absolutely massive leaps in communication technology. And this is where it gets really fun. Just think about the technological leap we've already made. We've gone from parents carrying literal piles of paper home in the 1980s to seamless Zoom calls today. That means the 2030 corporate meeting might just look like a Star Wars Jedi Council, complete with holograms and advanced VR headsets, making remote work even more seamless than being physically in the office. No way, right? Yet, before we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one absolutely crucial, provocative thought. The ultimate wildcard in all of this remains the broader economy. Right now, workers clearly have the leverage. But if the labor market tightens, if unemployment rises and jobs suddenly become scarce, will workers lose the power to demand that home office? Will the balance of power shift right back to the employer? It is going to be a fascinating dynamic to watch. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this gives you a much clearer view of the actual data driving the future of work.